Good afternoon, gentlemen. Today I'm going to be recording the Forming and Naming Ionic Compounds Lab for you. This will be completed using the lab guide that is found on Canvas. I will go through the procedure with you and explain the steps. I do have some of them already set up for that to make it a little bit easier, so we will be practicing with that in just a moment, but I will be showing you all of the compounds so that way you can write the color, and you're going to need to write the formula for these on your own. Then we'll go into the other steps, and then I will perform the experiment for you. So now we're going to go through our procedure. So step 1 says on your white piece of paper, which is underneath your well plate. Now here's what the well plate we're using looks like. It is clear. I have already rinsed it out. That's why you're going to see these water, but I provided a piece of white paper underneath. And what they would be doing in the lab is to label each of the 4 columns with the formulas of our 4 potassium ionic compounds. So you need to go ahead and make the formulas for each of these, but do this after or while I am dipping them in, because I will be showing you the color of each one. So I already did label all of these. The labeling can be found on the sample of what it should look like. This is also posted to Canvas so you can see that document, but I already have gone ahead and done that for us. And while we do this, I'm not going to be moving around like the lab guide says, but I will be lining it up fairly close, and I'll go through where I'll start with each one, and I'll do all the silver nitrates for each one, all of my cobalts, and so on. The next step is after I have my well plate. Number 2 says in each correctly labeled column, place 10 to 12 drops of each potassium compound in each well for the entire column going down, not across. So we're going to start with K3PO4, which is my potassium phosphate. Here's what my potassium phosphate looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and fill these wells up. So there I have the wells filled with my potassium phosphate. So now I'm going to fill up with potassium hydroxide. Here is what my potassium hydroxide looks like for your color. Now I'm going to be getting the potassium iodide. Here is that color for you. And the last thing that we are going to be doing is the potassium chromate. Here is that color. So now it's important to see why we label this white piece of paper, because while I can tell you this one is potassium chromate, it is extremely hard to tell the difference between my other 3 potassiums. So now that I have my wells ready with my different potassium compounds, I will now be going through and filling up each well. In the directions, it says to start at the solution that's at your table and label the side of your white paper as row 1 with the name of that compound. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start with silver nitrate and just move my way down, and those are the ones that you'll see. When I did the filling of the wells, I did use that time-lapse function. However, for this one, I'm going to just show you because I only need to add 2 small drops in that row, and I do have toothpicks necessary to stir as needed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to locate my silver nitrate, which it is right here. You need to come up with the formula of the silver nitrate, but for your sake, here is the color of that liquid. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop of silver nitrate to my first well. And I'm going to record what I see happening on the well sheet of paper that is the second sheet in your packet. So you're going to label each row, and then if a precipitate is formed, note the color of the precipitate. If a precipitate doesn't form, then you're going to leave it blank. So I'll also explain what a precipitate is once we have one form. So I take 1, 2. Here is what we saw happen for our first well. And it's hard to tell, however, it's not evenly mixed. So you should be able to see, let me see, that there's something solid formed. That is an example of a precipitate right there. Okay, leave this back in focus. Let's move on to the next one. There's my second one. Oh, give me just a second. I stand a little corrected because it is a little bit hard to tell on here. These first two wells are examples of when precipitates don't form. But if you notice in this well right here, I can see that solid is distinguishably separated. So that would be an example of a precipitate, whereas these would be examples of no precipitate. So I apologize for that error, but I want to make sure that you can see. There we go, get me back in focus. And the last one. This one's a little bit harder to tell, so I'm going to stir it. Those are all the examples for silver nitrate. So I'll bring it a little bit closer. Make corrections as needed, but this should be able to help you. And if you're having a hard time seeing it, I will be taking a photo, and I will have it at the end of this lecture. So the next one I have listed is cobalt-2 nitrate. So I'm going to find my cobalt-2 nitrate. You need to come up with the formula, but here is the liquid. Report the color. Now I'm going to add 1 to 2 drops. There's my first one, 2 in my second one, 2 in my third well, and 2 in my fourth well. I'm going to take a toothpick and stir it, but if you don't see a mixture, like all of it combining, then that's how you know a precipitate has formed. All right, so now I'm gonna do barium chloride. Here is barium chloride for you. Report the color, make sure you write that formula. And I'm gonna do my next 2 drops. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now this is a little bit harder to see, so I am going to assist you on this one. My first one, it appears as though a solid has formed because I can see a distinct separation. This one, it appears that there's a mixture. This one also has a mixture, and this one should have a mixture. So I think only 1 precipitate formed for that one. I'm gonna scoop this up. Next, we're gonna be dealing with iron 3 sulfate. Here is our iron 3 sulfate mixture. Report the color, and make sure you have the formula. I'm gonna do my drops. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Again, I'm going to take a toothpick. And I will have photos of these at the end. So, all right, I'm going to do strontium nitrate. Here it is. Record the color. Make sure you have the formula. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Going to give it a little stir. And we have our last one, which is copper 2 sulfate. Here is my copper. Record the color. 2 drops. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2. Take a toothpick, give it a little stir, and there they are. So now in the lab, your fellow classmates actually walked around and they rotated, but this is everything that you need to do. So what you're now going to do is make sure, using the photos, label on your well that's on your packet. Give me a second. Looks like this. Label it just how we have it labeled here. So with each of my phosphates, and then you have your elements going down, and whether you saw a precipitate or no precipitate. So you're gonna color, you're going to say, for example, move this over. In my first well of silver nitrate, this I saw no precipitate formed. This, as it was saying, you can see that a precipitate has formed, and the color would be brown. Then you can go here and say, I don't believe a precipitate has formed, and I don't believe a precipitate has formed. So you would want to write precipitate or P and then brown. But I will post a photo of this, excuse me, I will have a photo of this kind of like this with the same order. And then I'm also going to hold it up so you'll see the bottom as another image. If you have any questions, please let me know, but that should be able to help you. Your homework is to make sure that you have correctly identified the formulas for all of the compounds in this lab, and then to complete the precipitate well as the lab analysis questions. So on to the photos.